right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we're talking about Sam Mendes' latest, Empire of Light, which we recorded a little while back, and I'm happy to be talking about it now. It's a movie that I didn't love everything about, but there are certain things that work and certain things that don't, and we get into a lot of interesting stuff, I think, on this episode. Joining me is Kris Krainock. He has been on the show before. He's a filmmaker here in Las Vegas. We actually covered his latest film on the show a while back, and it's always great to have Kris on the show. So we got a great conversation coming up. Before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. You could, of course, find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, any of the major podcast apps. And while you're there, maybe drop a 5-star rating and review. We'd appreciate that. You could also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, join our Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, and don't forget about our Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content, as well as stuff from Awesome Movie Year and from my music career. So lots of great stuff over there. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. So with that said, let's talk some Sam Mendes. Kris Krainock is back from Europe and here to talk with me. Kris, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm getting ready to go on my own little trip, but, by the time that this episode comes out, that'll be long in the rear view, so I don't even know what I'm talking about here.
People will just think, oh, well, I hope you had a nice time.
That's right. I'm sure I will have a great time on that trip, and maybe you'll be on your next one. But hey, we're here to talk about Empire of Light. We're here to talk about some Sam Mendes today.
Mm-hmm.
You a big Sam Mendes fan?
That's a stretch. I mean, he's so good. He's really talented.
Sure.
Do I like every movie? No. I think he's lost an edge recently for me. Because I loved, when he started big, American Beauty, and I even really loved Jarhead, and I loved Road to Perdition, which is kind of a forgotten gem. A lot of people like it now. It's kind of getting a cult following. So I was a big Sam Mendes fan, and then right around the James Bonds, I kind of lost interest.
Yeah,
and the Revolutionary Roads, that was a clunker, and then the Away We Goes, also not great. So
Well, I mean, the last one was 1917, and I feel like a lot of people felt like that recaptured something. I mean, at least it was a big swing, in doing that kind of a film, and so he's kind of on an upward slope here. Even though, spoiler alert, neither of us really liked this movie that much, but there's still interesting things that I think he's trying to do.
Well, actually, to be more accurate, I liked all 4 movies that were Empire of Light. That's really I have objective criticism about it, but it was really good. There was so much good in it, and it's an interesting thing being such a personal script, which we can get into and stuff. And with 1917, a lot of people said they didn't like it, but it feels like it was almost on principle because it was such an Oscar baity type movie. But I really enjoyed it, even with the whole kind of cinematography stunt that it was and all that. And so, but I enjoyed it. I mean, it was a visceral experience. So overall, I think he's a hit and miss. But what director isn't? Yeah, what I mean? He's a really talented guy.
And 1917 was like, as big movie theater guys, like that was like you got to go back to the movie theater for this one kind of movie. And so that's always exciting to me. And of course, now we're talking Empire of Light, a movie all about how amazing the movie theater experience is. Allegedly, that's what it's about. It's also about, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other things. Yeah. But we'll get into a lot of those along the way, I'm sure. One other thing about Sam Mendes before we jump into the puzzle pieces, but I did just read this like right before you got over here to record this, that this is his first solo script. Yeah. I hadn't realized that going into this. So that's kind of interesting. Like, and this is going to come up later, I'm sure, with some of our puzzle pieces, but like it being more of a personal project for him to, put his stamp on his first solo script. I think it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's funny not to sound kind of catty, but for me it felt like the problems lie in the script. I think Sam Mendes is a obviously great director, and he's a great storyteller, and those words don't necessarily mean great writer, right? And so sometimes you need a writer who is a professional or skilled in that department to kind of rein you in.
Yeah.
when you have ambitious ideas, or especially when things are very personal.
Yeah.
We're looking down the barrel of The Fabelmans, which apparently is based on the Spielberg childhood thing, but I doubt he wrote the script himself.
Right.
Because you need some type of objectivity that maybe the script lacked, which is responsible for its lack of focus, which I think was both our main criticism. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm of course I'm happy for him. It seems like it's a new place for his career, and you should take risks.
Sure, absolutely.
So I would never denigrate it based on that.
Absolutely. Well, let's start getting into some puzzle pieces. What do you have for your first one?
All right, so my first one is not one that I necessarily think the filmmaker was aware of because it's relatively new. But I do think it's worth mentioning that sometimes there's these things in the air where similar movies start coming out. Like right after Roma came out, there was like a bunch of different Romas.
Right.
Like Hand of God came, and they're all similar, and they're like this kind of flashback childhood kaleidoscope type thing.
Yes.
And so for this movie, my first puzzle piece is gonna be Belfast.
Sure.
It feels like it feels like the obvious response to the Kenneth Branagh, I'm going to look back at my own childhood and kind of dramatize it, and it has social elements in it, and has love stories in it, and it has a lot of different threads, which I was a little underwhelmed with Belfast. It didn't blow my hair back, but it did feel more of a congealed storyline than this one did.
Yeah.
This one, as you kind of used the phrase, swung for the fences, maybe in regards to 1917, but this one as well. And so, to me, it feels like a Belfast, that Belfast vibe was in the air.
Yeah.
And that's what maybe we might get these more reflective films from filmmakers that are now in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that we have been growing up with.
Yeah.
Where I think we're going to start getting more reflective films.
Right, absolutely, and like you said earlier, you mentioned Spielberg with The Fabelmans. I mean, that is in that same vein. I was going to save this one for later, but I might as well throw it out there right now, as long as you're bringing up Belfast. I was thinking of Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza. Another personal story, reflecting back to childhood. That one more with like a love affair involved, and all of the things happening like on the outskirts of Hollywood, like movies are happening and being made, but they're not necessarily the ones that are making them. And the same can be said for here in Empire of Light. They're just working at the theater where they're getting shown. And so it's not a Hollywood movie per se, but it is around the world of movies. And all of those things are, of course, going to be the things that appeal to a filmmaker who's looking back at their life. So it makes sense that those are the things that they kind of go to when making that kind of reflective film.
Sure. And I definitely think not to plug my own trip, but being
please do that.
But being on this trip, I had the good fortune of going, visiting, doing the Cannes Film Festival and doing Venice, and so many of the films were somewhat warmly received or kind of wish-washy, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's the COVID, the COVID festival." Basically, this is still the kind of the mindset that we're getting out of the COVID years.
Yeah,
and so which is interesting to me because, minus the death, the COVID was a ball for me. Like I loved it, and I was really creative, and it was a good mental place for me.
Yeah.
Like again, except for the tragedy, which was horrible.
Sure.
But otherwise, it was a very creatively rich period, and so it's weird to see these movies that feel like we're kind of coming out of that. And I think even Empire of Light maybe is influenced by the whole shifting in the world of like we need to get back out to these places that we feel are important and symbolic, and filmmakers, in a very cliched way, always talk about cinemas being their churches and all that stuff. And I mean, I've said it too, but that's besides the point.
We're those guys. I mean, come on, like even if we try not to, but yeah, absolutely. And and it's not just COVID, it's also shifting attitudes in, moviegoers and
the streaming service, maybe even less COVID and more Netflix.
Yeah.
Another type of COVID with a whole other type of casualty.
A lot of casualties.
Of casualties there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we'll kind of piggyback on your Paul Thomas Anderson. One of my other main ones, and I think I even said this to you when we left the theater, was Phantom Thread came to mind.
Sure. And
I think it's because it's this kind of, and I loved Phantom Thread. I mean, and I'm not a big Paul Thomas Anderson fan. It's like he's a real hit and miss for me as well. But man, Phantom Thread was superb.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that film. But there's something about it too that's kind of this quiet, reflective story about a middle-aged person who's having trouble with romance, who has their own mental illness.
Yeah.
And there's just an atmosphere about it that's similar. there's kind of a quieter, slower vibe, which I think was more haunting in Phantom Thread. I think it kind of made that it had a more Hitchcockian feel in that film, to where this one is more nostalgic and more dreamy. But it's definitely even tonally very similar, and also features kind of that middle-aged mental illness vibe.
Sure. To that mental illness vibe, one of the things that I wasn't quite sure where exactly Sam Mendes was going with this is, like, I don't feel like anybody is going to be okay here, you know?
And, at the end of the film?
Yeah, and that's the thing with Phantom Thread, too. It's like, you know, these people are not going to be okay after the events that we've watched unfold. And so, you know, tone-wise, I think it makes a lot of sense to bring that up here.
Yeah, it kind of felt the same. You know, again, I think Phantom Thread's the kind of film that probably didn't do huge business. You know, it's not like it's a Marvel blockbuster film, but it's a legacy picture because it's such an established filmmaker. So you get your theatrical release and you get all these things. But it's not like it's, you know, highly marketed or pumped on the streaming service world. And so what these movies do, I think great films by great filmmakers tend to influence filmmakers more than the average audience.
Right.
You know, there's so many, like, kind of, I think that's what kind of Roma did. Roma basically made every director wake up and be like, oh man, I want to make my Roma.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, and so I feel like, and this is this is a whole other conversation for an entirely different podcast, but I know that Skyfall, Sam Mendes' debut in James Bond, was essentially The Dark Knight. It's like beat for beat The Dark Knight.
Sure.
It's just missing a man in a bat suit.
Look at you with the puzzle pieces for other movies.
I'm sorry. Wow. That's a whole other conversation.
I love it.
But what I'm saying is I know Sam Mendes is acutely aware of what's happening. He's watching films. He's a thinking person. And then he's excellent at ripping them off. And pretending that it's something original. Oh man, I said I was gonna put I was gonna keep the knives in. And I just whoa, no,
the Christopher Nolan fans are gonna come for you, Chris.
I hope they come.
Yeah,
whoever's left.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's legions.
Yeah,
because you know he does things in a linear way, so he's a genius. Obviously,
the world's gonna change forever next year.
Yeah.
When
Oppenheimer. We haven't seen history in a reverse order. You don't even know the bomb's gonna implode inward.
Well, I'll go with another piece here. This is, I feel like, probably the most obvious one. I'm going to go with Cinema Paradiso. You know, we just covered it on Awesome Movie Year, actually, just recently. I loved it. I know you weren't as hot on it as I was, but I get it. It's a little syrupy, it
is saccharine.
Yeah.
But I hate being told what to feel.
Yeah, I know. I get it, but god damn it, is it good? You know, but as far as, like, you know, a young kid, like, learning about life through, you know, a friendship with a projectionist and, you know, living his life through the power of cinema and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's all there. And you know, I forget, honestly, my brain is just so full of stuff that, like, I forget things so quickly, but whether or not the director was reflecting, if this fits into that just from a different time, reflecting back on his own childhood at all.
I believe it was.
Yeah,
I think it was. It was really based on a personal life experience, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I want to say it was.
I think it was.
Yeah.
And if it's not, who cares? It doesn't matter. I'm sure.
Right,
I'm sure he said that in a press junket. You know,
sounds good.
Yeah, he's like, I knew that projectionist. He was my own granddaddy. I'm sure that happened somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. I mean, yeah, it's not a bad film. And for me, Paradiso works better. This is one of the few times I've ever agreed with a producer over a director, and they should have kept the 30-minute director's cut.
Right.
You know, I was like, okay. We're already tiptoeing on unbearable on the normal release.
Yeah.
So we should not just add 30 extra minutes.
Yeah.
Now, I love movies as much as the next guy, and maybe more. And I love the cinema experience. But yeah, that one doesn't quite work for me. But it works as a puzzle piece because how could you avoid it?
Right. Absolutely.
So I have two movies that I'll touch on more briefly because I want to consolidate them a little. They're kind of making the same point, and it kind of comes from a Paradiso side, which is The Majestic.
Sure.
Frank Darabont's movie.
Yeah.
And Frank Darabont is such a talented guy. He's almost too talented. He's so good. That doesn't always mean that his films are good. It's one of those. He's just. I think he could fix anything. I think for years he was a script doctor and stuff, and so I think he is just a guy I really, really respect. And so even The Majestic is a beautiful kind of saccharine film, kind of soft and you know, They even have like really intense filters on the lenses, so everyone's dreamy like in the 1940s and stuff.
Yeah, I would say that comes from the same place.
Yeah,
like,
right?
Yeah,
absolutely. Like overly dramatized. And that's the thing that's weird to me about Empire Light is that it's like this is supposed to take place in the 80s, but it felt like it was the 50s.
Right, yeah, for sure.
That was another thing that I felt was odd, that it didn't quite jive in terms of the time period it was supposed to be critiquing.
Right.
If it was supposed to be in kind of an abstract time where there was a blending, that makes sense. But because it was so specific in terms of social commentary and criticism of the race issues at the time, I feel like it might have been a better choice to make it feel more like an 80s film.
Yeah, and they also took great pains to make sure the right movies were playing, because we just finished Awesome Movie Year on the year of 1980, and it was actually one of my favorite parts of the movie was seeing like all the movies we were covering on that season were playing at the theater, and it's like, oh wow, there they are, they're right there.
They're right there. Yeah. Someone in the research department knew about the year 1980.
Yes.
So that's true.
They did their Wikipedia.
They did. So The Majestics won, but the one I want to spend slightly more time on is a great film, a really important film that I feel should be seen more, and succeeds where a lot of these films, I don't want to say fail, but just feel overly demonstrative. It's a movie called The Long Day Closes, which is a movie by an English director named Terence Davies. And Terence Davies was a Manchester boy, grew up as a closeted gay man in a very homophobic time, and put that into his work and made films eventually as he came out as in his young adult life and was open about his sexuality and put it into his films. He made movies that were about very quiet, reserved people battling with internal issues, and they kind of usually put it in the framework of working class people or the cinema, and Long Day Closes especially has a flavor about escaping real life when you go into the movies.
Yeah.
There's a young boy who's kind of poor and might be battling with his sexuality, but not ever said bluntly. The film is has far too much artistic integrity to just put things like out there. The kid doesn't even know, so how would we know? Type of thing.
Right.
But he escapes into the cinema and finds a new life in that realm. And so it's a really delicate, beautiful film, underseen movie, one that's barely appreciated. Same with all Terence Davies films, although he continues to make films now. He just releases a movie every couple of years, and they're typically superb. They're really, really wonderful. Yeah. So Terence Davies, Long Day Closes, that one specifically, it's about the magic experience of the cinema and how people use it to escape.
I've never seen it. It sounds fantastic. I want to seek that out for sure. That sounds great.
Much more subtle than the ones we've mentioned.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it sounds great. I'm going to cheat a little bit with my next puzzle piece and go right back to Sam Mendes with American Beauty.
Okay.
I feel like in a lot of ways, our main young character, Stephen, is a black British Ricky Fitz in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And Hillary is a woman British Lester Burnham. And, if they had, actually had some kind of sexual relationship like the father was thinking they were, and, all kinds of questionable things happening, the relationships, all these kind of broken people connecting with one another, like all those kind of themes that were being explored in American Beauty, they all kind of seem to be the same things that are being explored here. And you also got Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's score taking a lot of cues, I feel like, from that classic Thomas Newman score.
True.
And all a little heavy-handed, although I think American Beauty is still great.
Yeah, I mean, American Beauty has aged okay.
Yeah.
It hasn't aged terribly.
Right.
It's definitely not as mind-blowing as when it arrived. I feel like that it was, I feel like even Steven Spielberg has a story where he saw it in like an early cut and said that's the best picture of the year.
Yeah.
And this was like Sam Mendes' first major motion picture. So there was kind of a unanimous feeling that this movie was relevant and important and shocking and bold and all these things. Nowadays it maybe feels a little heavy-handed, but I still think it plays better than Empire of Light, which is even more heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of the ham-fisted nature of the different story threads.
Right.
I think, not to sound repetitive or to beat a dead horse, but like if Sam Mendes had picked one or two of these main story threads to weave together, I think they could have been done more potently and more subtly.
Yeah,
because he is a great storyteller. Yeah. So that all is
number one, make Toby Jones a main character, the projectionist, and and focus there. Like, that is where the story is. That yes, it's Cinema Paradiso all over again, but that's where the story is, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. One of the other puzzle pieces I'll bring up now is a movie called Breaking the Waves, Lars von Trier's film. And that's, I mean, again, these are directors that I have ups and downs with that don't always, with him especially, it's like, I don't know if he's a genius or a hack or both, or how I feel about him on Tuesday is different on how I feel about him on Wednesday.
Sure.
And like some things are just undenied genius. And one of them is Breaking the Waves, which is just a real stone cold masterpiece. And the central performance in that is reminiscent of the Colman performance in the center of Empire Strikes Back. That's my other puzzle piece.
Yeah.
The Empire of Light.
Yeah.
And that's so Coleman's performance, which is really fantastic.
She's always great.
Modulated really beautifully, especially even in the extremes, where it came out of left field.
Yeah.
But really beautifully performed. But yeah, I think that her story was even fascinating. I think I loved the thread of that she worked at a movie theater and never saw movies.
Right.
Like, that's a movie. That's the movie.
That's an interesting thing. And to that point, actually, I was thinking about that a lot after we watched it. Like, that is so, like, the local film community. Like, I complain about this all the time. The people that are, like, they claim to be, like, within the world of film, but, like, they just torrent everything, and like they don't want to watch movies at the theater, and they like they don't give a shit about movies. And it's like, this woman like doesn't go and see movies even though she works in the theater. It just boggles my mind.
Yes. Well, as you know, I might not make any friends with this comment, although they don't like me anyway, so it's fine. You have helped me promote Cinema Mondays on the show for years, which we don't do anymore, unfortunately. I miss it, but we did Cinema Mondays for 8 years, a free movie night every Monday, and it was almost every single Monday for 8 years. We were committed.
Yeah.
And we showed free movies from around the world. Every week it was free. Every week it was a different movie.
Yeah.
And not once did we have a local filmmaker come.
Yeah.
I mean, never. Just shocking.
It's bananas. Yeah. I don't know how else to put it. Like, the way that, like, to claim that you want to be a part of the world of film, and then half of them think like, oh, Hollywood are like, the elite, liberal, blah 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 blah. like why do you want to be in movies? Like, why do you want to work in this industry?
Yeah, they want to own a Porsche. I think.
Yeah, that's it.
Which is, I think, a lot. I mean, it's not that crazy. So many people at the highest possible levels just want to keep the Porsche in the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not that shocked. It's just sad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a weird tangent, but
but it's, I mean, interesting nonetheless.
Absolutely. I'll go to another piece. This is going to get away from the film side of things here and speak more to the a bunch of workers, like, all getting to know each other and getting to love their little community there at the theater. I thought of Greg Motola's Adventureland. A great movie about a guy played by Jesse Eisenberg who has to take this summer job at this amusement park, and he really doesn't want to, but once he gets there, ends up falling in love with one of his coworkers and having just the absolute time of his life. And even though, this movie is, certainly promoted as Olivia Colman's movie, I mean, it is this Steven character more than anything. I mean, he is the main character played by Michael Ward. It is him, like, finding a place for himself amidst all this turmoil of the early 80s and in that time, and finding love and finding friendships and finding reason to try to push forward in his life and, go back to school and all those things. And so there's a lot going on with that character, and that camaraderie of finding these people who are kind of your people is a big part of this movie.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's actually a great puzzle piece.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really just came to my mind as you were talking about it is how both main characters are these outcasts. Because a big part of me at first was like, why are they attracted to each other?
Right.
I mean, it's obvious why she's attracted to him. I mean, he's blazing hot. That makes sense.
Sure.
But I mean, not that Colman is she's a beautiful woman, but the idea that she's kind of made to be frumpy and be kind of strange, and it's not that she's supposed to be kind of a sex symbol in the film. So what draws this guy to her? And I feel like they're both the wounded pigeon in the attic.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
another thread.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Sam Mendes was like, "Damn it, they got that metaphor. No, it's supposed to be hidden."
It's on the director's commentary. I'm like the 20th anniversary.
They both have broken wings. No, so no, but I mean that was actually something that just came to me now. Is that like that what drew them together is they're both outcasts, which I suppose maybe draws a thread a little closer to both, parts, kind of sides of the movie. Is that he's dealing with this as an outsider because of his race. She's dealing as an outsider because of her mental health. These are both things that are misunderstood in the 80s.
Sure,
misunderstood now.
Then. Yeah.
Especially the 80s and now as well.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something there where maybe that, because we talked about what provoked Sam Mendes to write this script. Like,
right.
Where's the genesis? Even if it is based on his experience, which
I
don't know if he slept with a schizophrenic woman or whatever.
Yeah, and he's certainly not a young black kid.
Yeah,
so.
Not that we're aware of.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's it. Maybe it's about outcasts in a time when the outside world was especially ignorant. Although I'm hesitant to say that because in 50 years we'll be viewed as ignorant now. So it's hard to say words like that, But I guess more ignorant than now.
Sure.
And the movies are impervious to those things. I mean, the movies are a place of escapism.
Yeah.
For many people. And to look at it, even if it's more art film, it's to provide a different view.
Yeah.
And away from real life. And so maybe that's the thread. I'm just kind of slowly discovering it now talking to you, but I didn't see that. I didn't experience that during the film.
Right.
Only thinking about it now have I put the puzzle together.
There you go. That's what this show is here for. Look at us.
There you go.
Look at us. We're doing it. Chris, what's your next piece?
So I'm going to talk kind of about the race element and the interracial love story. I'm going to bring up a Rainer Werner Fassbinder movie called Ali, Fear Eats the Soul.
Okay.
And it's a really wonderful film, which a film in and of itself is actually kind of a rehash or an update to the Douglas Sirk film, All That Heaven Allows.
Okay.
So we'll use them as both puzzle pieces, but I'll kind of focus on Ali. But it's about a middle-aged woman who feels, a white woman, which is important to mention.
Sure.
And she is kind of lost and private and quiet and kind of a weirdo, and she goes to a dance hall and sees a big young strapping black man, a Moroccan man, and he's kind of this powerhouse, and they begin this affair.
Yeah. And
she wants to be open and doesn't want to hide it, and he's kind of part of the criminal underbelly a little bit, and he's somewhat poor, and but so she takes him in, and they really fall in love. But her family is unable to accept it. And I think that there's just kind of... Sam Mendes has a directorial style that I think he comes from this type of cinema. He probably comes more from the art house than he does from major blockbusters.
Yeah.
And I think that Fassbinder was probably a major influence on him in general. And that story is very specific to that kind of feeling.
Yeah, yeah. No, that sounds like a good one. Another one that I haven't seen, but that sounds like a really good one. And to that particular point, like we were just talking about it before, like why he would tell this particular story about this interracial relationship, which is like the main crux, even more so than the power of cinema. Like that is like the center of the film in a lot of ways, and especially with the mental illness aspect, and there's a lot going on there that it kind of leaves you wondering, like where did this come from? And I think films like that probably are kind of where he's coming from with wanting to tell a story like this, because of stories that have been told before like that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this thing is, I hate to be someone who is saying that I strive for formula. I'm not saying that, not by kind of poking fun at the fact that it's kind of all over the place, doesn't suggest that I demand things that I've seen before, for it to work, but because it's kind of a reductive version of that critique, which is like, pick a movie. And by that, you can extrapolate like a movie we've seen, a movie we understand, like a movie that has some type of formula that we can follow. And that's not necessarily what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, I admire its ambition.
Yeah.
I'm confused by it. But I admire it because it's really more of a matter of if it works or doesn't it, as opposed to there being a certain set of rules you have to follow.
Sure.
And this one just felt like there was a little extra flour in the recipe. I mean, it was just, there's too many ingredients for the banana bread. You know what I mean? But it's, so I think that back on movies like a Fassbinder who Fassbender really worked in melodrama, which is why he was a fan of Douglas Sirk. Douglas Sirk was big in the early 50s and early 60s, all through that period of kind of big, glossy melodramas.
Yeah.
And Fassbender was a drunk, gay, anarchist punk rock type figure. He'd make whole movies in 11 days, but they weren't these chaotic films. They were very delicate, beautiful, stylized pictures that you would never think were made in that amount of time. He'd take 2 and 3 films to can a year. To give you an idea, he made, I believe, 38 or 39 films in his life and died at 32. Or 42 movies and died at 38, pardon me.
Okay.
And so, I mean, that's the kind of guy we're talking about. So he's the opposite of Douglas Sirk in terms of the large scale of his movies. And yet, they're very delicate and very beautiful. So the reason I bring that up is that he's an influence on me personally. Any director that kind of encounters him, it's like finding, he's like, after you get through the Bergmans and Kubricks and Fellinis, like that's like the A string. Then you go and you find Fassbender and you're like, oh God. And so I definitely think that dealing in the melodrama, but kind of giving it the urgency and the defiance that Fassbender did is what made that melodrama work. To where I think Sam Mendes may have turned into the Hollywood guy. He's kind of an establishment filmmaker now. I don't know if he has the teeth anymore to pull off a movie like Empire of Light. Like if he had a little bit more balls the way he had with American Beauty, which was edgy and pushed something at that particular time, Empire of Light might just seem a little too comfortable to really tackle the topics that it's trying to tackle.
Yeah.
I know it's kind of like a whirligig thought process, but does that make sense?
It makes sense. And and I would imagine it's from the point of view of a Sam Mendes, it must be difficult just to even get into this, even though it's such a personal story that he wanted to tell. And obviously, like we talked about, it's the first thing he wrote himself to tell. And like, it must just be hard to get yourself back into that mindset after doing James Bond in 1917. Like, it's like, it's just a different world.
Big splashy pictures. Big, that's the thing is, I think he has become symbolic of establishment filmmaking in the art realm. In the highbrow realm. And that might be a hard mindset to break, even if he's aware of it. But that might be the one thing that's going on, is that it has the ambition of a Fassbender, but it doesn't have the teeth. And that's another way it connects to that movie besides its subject matter, which is similar.
Well, I'm glad that you're bringing up the relationship into your pieces, because I'm realizing like the majority of mine deal more with the cinema aspect of this, and so I'm glad we're getting both sides of that. I'll go with another one that does talk more to the cinema side, and a very different movie, but I thought about Be Kind, Rewind from Michel Gondry. As far as movies, cinema being a place that brings community together and allows a space for people to share with each other and share these stories and be moved by them together and everybody interacting together. And while that movie deals more with the creative aspect of it, like I'm always thinking about the end scene where the community all comes together and they get to watch it, and just how moved everybody is by it all. And it's just such an amazing ending. And, Empire of Light, it poses that, no matter what's happening to you, whether it is mental illness, relationships, institutional racism, all the things going on in this movie. All these freaking things, like sitting and watching a good movie can fix it all,
temporarily at least.
Yes.
And I agree. I think that there's something. I mean, again, it's hard to be two movie fans sitting around and talking about movies, but I guess only movie fans are listening to the podcast, so that's okay. We're in good company.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
The thing is, I mean, our community, which I wish was more of a community in general. Sometimes the business side of things is so adversarial. You're trying to make it in the business, and so the people that you're around are thinking your failure is their success and vice versa. And so it's somewhat of a cutthroat thing. But the movie theater experience, kind of all that melts away.
Sure.
And so it's been, it's nice that there's movies that touch on that and talk about the community aspect. And I like that the movie theater employees keep her coming back. Yeah. They don't really know where she's going to go if she keeps having these breakdowns, you know, and they don't turn their back on her. Of course, the boss, the Colin Firth character, kind of uses her to his own ends. Yeah. But he gets humiliated and then banished. Yeah. As he should. Yeah. And but the rest of the staff really welcomes her back. Yeah. And I think that's symbolic of the movie lover mentality, really.
Yeah.
If you remove the business side of it, movies are a very delicate group of people. They're a beautiful, thoughtful bunch.
Yeah.
So I like that kind of feels that way in the film.
Absolutely. Well, what do you got next?
I'm going to talk about 2 films briefly. But they're kind of the work of Hal Ashby.
Okay.
Which he did Being There, which is
Sure.
actually referenced in the movie itself. She actually watches Being. That's the movie she ends up seeing.
That's the big one.
But that's symbolic to me, especially because the Chauncey Gardner character is kind of a simple Chaplin-like, childlike character.
Sure.
And I believe even Colman's character was described as childlike at one point in the film, if maybe I'm misremembering.
Mm-hmm.
She is a complex adult woman. She's not mentally slow or anything of that nature, but she has a mental illness that makes her take medicine, Thorazine, I believe it was,
right,
that I think makes her feel foggy.
Sure.
And that fogginess, that simplicity, that kind of quiet dopiness is very reminiscent of a Chauncey Gardner.
Sure.
And so I think there's a kind of a parallel in this misunderstood, simple, central character.
Yeah.
And then also, to touch on that, I think is in a movie called Harold and Maude, and that of the old young. The what is it? The spring winter or the summer winter?
May
December.
Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
The May December relationship. So I think that Hal Ashby in general, kind of his ability to walk the fine line of genre. Like he made comedies that were not funny, and he made dramas that were not dramatic, and he worked within. He blurred the lines of genre, which I think maybe Mendes was attempting to do with this film.
Yeah.
Because there's so many genres at once. And so hit those 2 movies in general, though, Being There, especially for its literal appearance within the film, its relationship to the main character, and then the May December of Harold and Maude.
Absolutely. I had Harold and Maude on my list as well. And cool. I didn't even think about Being There as central as it is to the film. You're absolutely right. Like theme-wise, it like kind of fits too with that character. And how Olivia Colman's character is. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense combining both of those 2 Hal Ashby pieces there. So that's great.
Great.
So that brings me to my final piece then, which, again, like I said, back to the power of cinema, it's the Nicole Kidman AMC ad. We come to this place for magic. We come to AMC theaters to laugh, to cry, to care, because we need that. Somehow heartbreak feels good in a place like this.
Oh god, is that the real line?
Yeah, absolutely. Is that not this movie?
It is. Yeah. It is the AMC commercial.
Yeah.
The memes of that are worth me sitting through that commercial a million times.
Yeah.
Because it's so cringy. Didn't they pay her like $1 billion to do that? Like,
probably.
Like, such a disgusting amount, I heard.
She deserves every penny.
She does.
She killed it.
I love Nicole Kidman. I really do, because she makes small movies. She cares about art films. She does challenging stuff. She takes risks.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I'm a big fan of hers. And if they offered her a big payday, good for her for taking it.
I've always loved Nicole Kidman, like in so many different things. But when like I just kind of turned a corner, I was like, you know what? I'm in for everything she's gonna do. Aquaman, like she is like so like just CGI ass kicking Nicole Kidman. Who knew that she would be good at that?
She could do everything.
Yeah,
she really can. Yeah, I mean, sure. Why not?
Why not?
No, yeah, I mean, when I watched her, another Lars von Trier, but in Dogville.
Sure.
And I was like, man, this is a woman that will really do stuff for art. I mean, and I always, no matter what, admire Tom Cruise and her for basically pausing their career for 2 years and working with Kubrick and stuff like that. The Eyes Wide Shut budget was $20 million, which at the time was Tom Cruise's salary.
Yeah.
That was the entire budget. So they basically did a movie for free, essentially, and lived in London for 2 years and just stopped their career at the height of it. So I've always respected those two, and Nicole Kidman especially.
Yeah.
Because that's just incredible.
Incredible. Yeah, they're awesome.
All right, so I have just brief ones left.
Okay, let's do them.
So I have to say, my last real one is A Beautiful Mind.
Okay.
Because it's just one of those films that it's over-polished.
Mm-hmm.
This one has the deficit of being based on a true story. Because John Nash, the mathematician that it's based on, had a much more complex and checkered, when he was in his schizophrenic phases, he was also homophobic and also had gay experiences. So that was kind of that was a strange paradox. He was also anti-Semitic during these things, so he was a much more challenging character than the movie version presents.
Yeah, and they sanded that
he wasn't
all
like
down.
Russell Crowe, you know, right? I mean, making umbrellas with his fingers in the sky. Like that was not that dude.
Yeah.
So, and that it's still a very successful movie. I mean, won Best Picture. I even enjoy the movie, although I hesitate to say that. I don't want to admit it, but I do.
Yeah.
It's just well done. I can't help it. But I feel like Empire of Light has that kind of Ron Howardy polish.
Yeah.
Kind of has this kind of oversimplified look at difficult topics, but with a little bit of charm thrown in and a little whimsy thrown in.
Yeah.
That makes it more palatable. And of course, the more obvious reason is that it deals with schizophrenia.
I feel like we almost maybe would have liked Empire of Light more if it came out in the early 2000s, like around that same time where there wasn't so much of like this is kind of a time and doesn't really work anymore or something like this, you know?
Yeah, I think we're angrier now.
Yeah.
I think, the economy has collapsed several times. There's been a global pandemic. The housing market's upside down and crazy. You have to work 3 jobs to do anything. We're frustrated and agitated. And as much as there is this kind of beautiful sentiment, which is like, we want to escape. We want to go back to the movie and go to a safe place.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes even in our entertainment, we would benefit from a little edge.
Yeah.
I think we need to exercise those feelings of tension.
Sure.
And very polished, very establishment. I use that word establishment over and over again, but it's just coming off of doing this festival tour and seeing these huge movies that are supposed to be the art house films, and they have $180 million budgets. And, these are just establishment filmmakers giving each other gold sticks. I mean, this is not, art movies and not art house. So there's a artifice to that that's frustrating. And not just for me as a filmmaker trying to, break into the room, but everyone's frustrated at this time. So I think movies that are too softball might run into that trouble where they're a little frustrating. Yeah, I think if the Beautiful Mind came out today, we'd be like, bullshit.
Yeah, oh god, yeah.
We would rip it apart.
Yeah. And it won the Oscar and everybody for the most part loved it at the time.
It's still pretty dang good. As a movie where if you can overlook the fact that it's virtually made up. Yeah. Then fine. Yeah, these 2 beautiful people can get through anything and cry at a Nobel Prize speech, which is so funny from the Charlie Kaufman film. I was like, that was the best part of that film.
Yeah.
Rolled on the ground, like, oh my God, is this a Beautiful Mind? But anyway, so I don't want to dwell on it too much, but there's a lot with the Beautiful Mind. It's oversimplification of big, complex psychological aspects. It's polish, the Ron Howardness of it all. Yeah. I then want to briefly talk about The Goldfinch.
Oh, okay.
And here's why, though. It's not for the reason you think. It has nothing to do with the story. It has
I never actually saw it. I remember everybody kind of made fun of it when it came out.
You've missed nothing.
Yeah.
But Roger Deakins was the cinematographer of The Goldfinch and of Empire of Light. Yeah. And the one thing that was, and this is going to sound like it's canned, but it's true. The guy is a master. He's a really beautiful cinematographer, really knows what he's doing, has a style, but it never interferes with the film itself. Makes very beautiful images. And so when it comes to The Goldfinch, I think that there's a visual parallel. They kind of look and feel similar in terms of their use of light and their camera movements and their choices of compositional methods. But they both don't work. I think Empire Light is a superior film. I feel like Goldfinch crashed and burned. Right. It was just not a good picture. But and Empire Light is 4 good pictures, just on top of each other, as we said. It's the sloppy Joe of movies this year. So, but they both are visually beautiful, and they both have Deakins at the helm visually, and it is a potent, brilliant, visual, and sumptuous experience without being overkill. Yeah. I think Goldfinch was maybe even more sumptuous, so there's a lot of dust and light beams and those types of things. But it kind of had that visual quality about it. So those are similar. And they both don't quite work, so that's similar in that way. No. And the final one that I have to say before I leave, otherwise my diehard fan base will will turn off their computers and their phones.
Let's hear it.
The Shining.
Yes, of course.
So I don't know if you noticed the carpet of the movie theater. Yeah. But it's not the actual pattern, because that'd be too distracting. Right. There's too much visual space it takes up for there to actually be the pattern of the iconic orange and brown Shining Hotel, the octagonal one. But it is orange and brown. It does have an octagon type pattern, and it's very, very reminiscent of The Shining. And The Shining came out in 1980.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say there's a legit Oh, and of course on the wall, this you could say this about everyone, but there's a picture of Kubrick on the wall when he scans the wall toward the end, and it has all the filmmakers, and there's I think a picture of Paths of Glory if I remember it specifically, either that or one of the early black and white Kubricks. But I'm gonna have to say The Shining. Yeah. Because I'm contractually obligated to.
Yeah, absolutely you are. But yeah, no, yeah, you're totally right. And I feel like that was a thing of the time, like those just awesome patterns and stuff like that. But that
could be a coincidence for sure.
Yeah, but that I mean, come on, it is 1980. It's kind of perfect for it to be a nod, a little. It
has to be, right?
Yeah, come on. I think so.
I feel like the Empire itself, the Empire Theater, is almost overlook.
Hey, why not?
Place full of ghosts.
Yes.
All these films, you can.
There's another thread for you.
There's another thread. It needed one more. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I would have loved. Let's think real quick before we go. Let's talk about what movies are in it. There's the
Blues Brothers?
No. I mean, what films could Empire of Light be by itself? Individually?
Oh, yeah.
It could be the social commentary 1980s skinhead movie.
Sure, yeah.
Right? It could be
Which, by the way, the skinheads banging on the glass, I thought of Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, yeah.
So you get a little visual thing there. But yeah, no, the turmoil there.
Could be a social commentary movie or a skinhead movie.
You got a May December romance.
May December.
You've got, of course, The Power of Cinema.
Which is like what could be symbol as the projectionist and the young boy. Teaching the young boy about the art of cinema. That could be its own film.
Yep.
There's the mental illness woman breakdown.
Yes.
Movie, the woman that, has to escape as an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
That's 4 right there.
Yeah, we're already to 4, and without even like going too deep into anything.
Yeah, those are the 4 main ones that are then kind of interwoven.
Yeah, all in the movie about the power of the cinema, allegedly. So it's like, it's a little much to kind of all throw together, but yeah, I mean, I think you said it. I think as far as like closing thoughts or anything like that, like there are a lot of solid things happening, just too much all at once, and that kind of is the story of this movie, I feel like.
Yeah, the thing is, I've never seen a movie that could be a puzzle piece for itself. I did write down Empire of Light on my list.
Yeah.
No, I'm just being extra harsh for comedic sake, but no, it's and the thing is that I found myself getting intrigued by every element, but then I was just pulled away from it to explore some other part, and I felt like that kind of was a balancing act that I kept falling off the off the rope. I couldn't kind of stay interested. The thing that kept it all tied together was Deacon's visual prowess, his ability, and his craft was evident throughout, and so that kind of makes it congealed in a way. But character-wise, and even with a story of schizophrenia, that's a challenge in and of itself in a screenplay by itself. It's hard to think about it tonally. Because it's such an erratic disease. So if you want to have you experience what it's really like, the movie itself will be erratic. Well, then plop that in the center of already too many chefs in the kitchen. Type of thing. So I feel for it a lot. I want to like it more than I do. And it's one of those movies that I might, go back and revisit, and it might be one of the ones that I know are flawed, but that I like to just kind of live in for 2 hours. Because I like the old movie feel, and I like the world it kind of created. And there's so many things you admire in like the performances. Yeah,
you could do worse as far as a movie to just sit and live in for 2 hours. It's a great setting. So.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, even though it's like the 1950s/80s.
You're right, a little of both, but. Well, I think that does it for Empire of Light. Kris, is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, there's actually 2 films in theaters right this second. I'm not sure when you plan to release this, but because we're in Las Vegas, they might be gone by the time this comes out. But if you're anywhere else, if you're in LA or New York, see Tar. And that's playing. It's my favorite film from Venice. It was a masterful film by Todd Fields, and Cate Blanchett's masterful in it. So see that as soon as you can before it goes. And also Triangle of Sadness, which is the Palme d'Or winner from Cannes. It is a bizarre, strange, gross, fabulous, very Louise Buñuel type. Not Louise Buñuel. I said Louise, his wife. Louise Buñuel type vibe. Very strange, very unique. And those are the 2 movies that are playing right this second that you should run out and see.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, Tar is the next thing I'm going to see, but hopefully I get to see it in the theater. I really hope so.
Tar is the way to go.
Oh,
I like Triangle of Sadness. Like, there's the big debate of should it won or should it this, and I mean, it's all BS anyway.
Yeah.
It's interesting, which is the most important thing.
Right.
And Tar, to me, is a flat-out masterpiece.
Yeah.
I was blown away. Not to sound like, I don't know. I was somewhat underwhelmed during Venice. I was kind of shocked this was the best the year had to offer.
Yeah.
But Tar really was superb.
Awesome. Kris, tell us a little more about your trip and tell us what you got going on right now.
Oh man, so as you guys have heard, I haven't been here in a while, but last time I was here, I was plugging a movie called Bizzarro e Fantastico, which is my most recent film, shot in Italy, and I was just in Europe for 4 months touring it, which was a huge honor, best summer of my life. As I mentioned, I had the opportunity to promote it and show it out of competition at Cannes, and I also got to promote it in Venice, and then a million wonderful festivals in between. We did 8 countries, 41 cities. It was absolutely fantastic. Now I'm back. And it looks like there might be a TV show version of Bizzarro somewhere on the horizon. We're working on that now. I got a play in Paris, which I think I've also plugged in the past, called L'Imposteur. And that's a half English, half French play that's getting produced and will be on the stages of France in 2023. So those are the big main things going on right now, and it was just a wild ride for Bizzarro. So thanks for everyone who's been supportive and watching it and talking about it and keeping it alive for all this time. I know you guys are probably sick of hearing it, but I appreciate you being as enthusiastic as you've been all this time. So thank you.
Hey, I'm so, it's been awesome seeing your whole tour and everything, and very excited to see what comes next.
Awesome,
and,
thanks, man.
As always, thank you so much for being here.
I really appreciate it. As always, happy to be here, happy to do it, and very thankful. Thanks.
I'm Josh Bell.
And I'm Jason Harris, and we co-host a podcast called Awesome Movie Year.
Each season, we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year.
We deep dive into these specific years, and we pick out why they were such great years for films. We go over the biggest hits, the biggest flops, the best picture, some personal picks, some cult classics.
Years we've covered in past seasons include 1994, 2003, 1977, and 1984, and we've got all of film history to look forward to. So check us out at awesomemovieyear.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Empire of Light. Thanks to Kris Krainock for joining me on that one. And thank you to all of you for listening. If you enjoy what we're doing here on Piecing It Together, with the puzzle pieces and finding the possible influences of these new films, drop us a rating and review over on Apple Podcasts or Good Pods or Spotify. We'd really appreciate it. 5 stars would be extra nice. And, of course, make sure you're subscribed while you're there, or following. Don't they call it following now? Whatever they call it. Make sure you do that. You could also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. I mentioned my New York trip in that conversation because I was just getting ready to leave when we recorded that. Just so you know, I am back, and it was a great trip. And I don't think I mentioned that on any other previous episodes since I've been back. So why not now, even though this episode comes out like a month after I got back? What is time? Anyway, speaking of time, I'm spending all my time getting ready to release my new album, More Content, and also finishing up my next album, which is insane. That there's so much music that I'm working on right now. You can find some sneak peeks of that album and the next album, as well as other advanced music and other great stuff over on the Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I combine bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, Awesome Movie Year, and my music career. Check it out, patreon.com/bydavidrosen. We appreciate you just listening to the show and listening to my music, but if you want to, chip in that way, we certainly appreciate that. And speaking of that new album, the pre-order should be live now at the time this episode goes up. It was set to go live December 2nd. So I think that's right around the time this episode was scheduled to release. But yeah, it's coming December 30th, though. It'll be available for sale. It'll be available for streaming. And let's play a song from that new album to close out this episode. This is a track called Distance. I really love this track. I hope you enjoy it. And we'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
an All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.